Reddit, tell me your glitch in the Matrix stories. Redditor 1, not sure if this relates, but, about 2 years into my relationship with my GF, we'll call her Susan, I had a dream about my ex. Dream went like this. I was in my room at my mother's house, where I lived at the time, slamming my ex. Balls to the wall, sexing it up. I knew I was cheating on Susan, but didn't care. So in the middle of it, I look over to the window which you can see the back porch from, and Susan is there, watching us, crying and mortified. I then woke up. I thought it was a weird dream, but dismissed it. A few days go by and Susan and I are hanging out in my room. She brings up this weird dream she had a few days prior, and describes my exact dream except from her POV looking through the window. Freaked me the duck out, didn't say anything about it at the time. I still haven't said anything 5 or 6 years later. It still weirds me out. Redditor 2, picture of my friends when they were younger. We've been trying to figure out whose hand is making the thumbs up behind the kid on the right. Redditor 3, my dad had this little toy monkey that he used to call his favorite child and tease me and my siblings with it. Not in a bad way, but it was really frustrating to us and we spent hours trying to steal it from him. Well, anyways, one day we finally got it and threw it into the garbage after drawing on it and mangling it for a bit. My dad laughed and searched for it a bit, but basically figured we had thrown it out and gave up after a week or so. Anyways, a few years later, when I was about 17, I'm walking down the street in Toronto I don't live in too, was just visiting friends and see this little orange object on the side of the road. When I walk over to it, I pick it up and see that it was the exact same fucking monkey. It even had the black Sharpie lines on it from when we drew all over it. I honestly cannot even come up with the chances of that happening, especially considering our garbage is sent to a local dump and is nowhere near Toronto. Edit, I actually took it with me and killed it with fire just so I knew it wouldn't come back again. Redditor 4, I used to work in a building that had 3 levels of sub-basements, with the piece of lab equipment I typically worked on in the lowest basement. I had the only key. There was a wired phone in there, and I did work late some nights. But not this night. I was sleeping alone in my apartment when I woke up to a call on my cell phone from my girlfriend at 3 a.m. She was in hysterics and asking why I scared her. Apparently she received a call from that basement phone just a minute earlier, with someone who sounded like me slowly repeating her name, until crackling and fading out. My apartment was 10 miles away from work. I thought she was lying, but I saw the 3 a.m. call from the basement phone logged on her cell myself. Still freaks me the duck out. Redditor 5, every so often, I'll have dreams which play out exactly as I've dreamt them, years later. They're usually insignificant moments, so I make a mental note and move on. Redditor 6, I used to work in music and toured with this band. The guitarist Josh of the band's best friend Matt had died a couple years back. He always talked about the kid and he seemed like a great guy. Josh always had this reoccurring dream where Matt was standing on this abandoned street which, supposedly, was metaphorical for purgatory. Josh had all these conversations with Matt in these dreams, and because he had overdosed unexpectedly, he felt like his spirit was not able to move on. At the end of the dreams, Matt would take a bulb from the street light on the street they were standing in the middle of. Josh described these dreams in extreme detail and I could pretty much picture what the street looked like. Fast forward to about 6 months into touring with these guys. They were huge Bright Eyes fans and wanted to stop in Cassadaga, Florida. Bright Eyes singer wrote an album there and it's a really creepy, spiritual medium place. It might be worth noting that 6-7 of the people I was with are all atheists. So we drive into Cassadaga around 2 or 3 a.m. and drive around. Suddenly, this big black dog comes in the middle of the road and just stops and looks at us. The guys in this band were weird as duck and were saying things like "follow the dog. It's trying to show us something." And in my mind, I'm just thinking they are all ducking idiots. We follow this dog for a few blocks, as it was walking pretty slowly. All of the sudden, we turn a street and the dog bolts. We try to speed up but Josh says stop the ducking van. This is it. We are all confused and he gets out of the van and looks around. This is it. This is the street in my dreams. We hang out for about 15 minutes and from the way he described the street, from having houses on the left to a park on the right, it was definitely the street. As we get in the van, a street light goes off and we just drive off. He claims he never had any more dreams about it, as that was closure on everything. Edit. Grammar. Redditor 7, middle school. The entire 8th grade class had to do this thing called a cultural fair where we research our lineage cultural roots, and present it after school at night for all families to see. Me and a buddy are cruising the empty halls out of boredom before the whole thing starts, and for some stupid reason, I bet him $10 I can open any locker, and he gets to choose which one. He takes my bet and picks a random locker. He jiggles the handle and spins the dial on this a few times to make sure it's locked. I remember, it was locker 424. So I look at him, go PSSSSHHH. Watch this. I spin it, 6 right, 24 left, 34 right. I remember thinking, these numbers sound right in my head. The latch lifts up and it swings open. Redditor 8, sort of related perhaps? When I was looking at colleges, I was walking down a stairwell to see a building when I passed a girl about my age. We both met gazes, passed, and then at the same time stopped, turned back around and looked again. For a moment we just stared at each other. It was like I had just run into someone I had known my whole life but had never seen before. At the same time we asked, "Do I know you?" Confused, we spent a few moments trying to figure it out. We swapped names, shared where we were from, where we had traveled, but there was no match up at all. Nothing. She apparently felt the same way, like she'd known me all her life. We didn't know anything about one another, but there was this unexplainable, undeniable connection. Her parents, who hadn't realized she had stopped and had continued walking, came back and hurried her off before I could get her phone or email. Julia, if you're out there, message me. Edit. Before you suggest it, I'm pretty sure we weren't twins. She was black and I am white. Redditor 9, driving home on a storm day, I see that a side road up to the local golf course is blocked off by flashing barricades. I also spy a Mercedes parked past the barricades with its hazards on. I stop and walk up to the car to see if they need help. I'm an EMT. I shine my light in the back seat to see a man slumped over, apparently asleep. Thinking I've got a few drunks, I move up to the driver window and rap on the glass and shine my light in. The driver is sitting bolt upright, unmoving, staring straight ahead. My window rapping or light doesn't cause him to blink, flinch or move. I look over and the passenger is slumped forward onto the dash. This begins to creep me out. I call down to the sheriff's station and request a code 2 no lights sirens unit up to my location to help me check them out. Doors are locked. While on the phone I walk back to my truck to get my go bag. As I'm on the phone with dispatch, she asks me to get a license number for the car just as a PGE Power Company cherry picker truck comes rumbling down from up the closed road. I move to go around the truck to get the plate number, and the car is gone. I talked to the driver of the truck and he said there was a 80-foot tree down across the road, and that he didn't think it'd be open for a day or so. So the question is, the heck did the car go? Tree up one way, barricades down the other. It's kept me a bit unsettled when stopping at accidents hazards since then. Edit. Here is the intersection via Google Maps plus F plus Santa plus Cruz plus CAHL equals NLL equals 36.991715, 122.007856 SPN equals 0.006666, 0.001032 equals N plus Branciforte plus F, plus Santa plus Cruz, plus California T equals HZ equals 21 VPSRC equals 6 layer equals C CBLL equals 36.991669. 122.00792 Pinoid equals 91 XHGWZ4ZQPQNM7 PFN1 XGCBP equals 12,2.93, 0,1.87. Barricades were 5 feet in front of the camera and the tree was up around the distant bend. Redditor 10, this one time at work, I was responsible for making boiled eggs. This guy came in and ate one. He was so intent on peeling his hard-boiled egg that he didn't notice that I brought a new tray of eggs in and set the older ones aside to make egg salad. Redditor 11. Ever since I was a kid, I have what I call doubling occasionally happen around me. I put something in a pocket, then later find it in another pocket, as well as the original in the pocket I had put it in. And yes, it has happened to money before score. The most standout example was when I was a teen at camp. All the leaders had engraved plastic name tags, and we were only issued one. I used to keep moving mine between my hat and my shirt. At the end of camp, I just crammed all my stuff in a duffel and headed home. Later, when I unpack, the first thing I do is pull out my hat with the tag on it. Okay, so that's where I had it last. And of course, a minute later, I pull out a shirt with the same name tag pinned to it. I also experienced a similar phenomenon when I was a kid. For a few years it happened on a daily basis, but haven't seen it in a long time. Someone would place something in their pocket, backpack, etc. But when they went to grab it later, it would be missing. I would then reach into my pocket, backpack, whatever, and pull the item out. I initially got accused of being a thief, but when it happened repeatedly, when I hadn't even been within 20 feet of the victim, my friends and classmates stopped doing so and just kind of accepted that that would happen around me. TLDR, I'm a quantum counterfeiter pickpocket. Redditor 12. At 12 years of age, my mom let me stay in the truck as she went grocery shopping. As I wait, I see an old guy walking towards the truck with an indescribable look at me, as if I know too much. He stops 5 feet from the truck, looks at me for a couple seconds, and heads back the exact way he came. It was rather traumatic for some reason and very confusing at that age. 5-6 years later, my dad was showing me home videos of us at Yellowstone. At Old Faithful, I noticed the same guy, same look, same clothes, peering at us on camera and at me through the TV. I'm freaked out just telling this. Edit, I didn't expect this story to be such a hit. A few more details. The Yellowstone video was from when I was very young. I'm thinking 1 or 2 years of age. I was in an awesome baby pack on my dad's back. Also, I will try my hardest to find the video. I don't see my parents often, and if I do, I don't think either of them will know where our home videos are. Divorce can be a messy and destructive thing. If I do find it, I will definitely post the video and message you all. Redditor 13. I had a monkey on my keychain back in high school. This chain was 3 links long. One day I was walking out to my car and I heard something hit the ground. I looked down to discover the monkey with links 1 and 2 of the chain still attached on the ground and link 3 still attached to my belt. All of the links were still fused together. My only guess is the chain phased itself apart. Redditor 14. I was walking up a hill in Portland, Oregon, and found a pack of American spirits on the ground, only missing 2. A week later in San Francisco, CA, I bought a pack of American spirits, and after smoking 2, I put the pack in the inside pocket of my jacket. Next time I went to smoke, the pack was gone. Redditor 15. One time I found an onion ring in my basket of fries. Redditor 16. No one ever believes me when I tell them this. I was in high school and took a write out of my math class. I walked for quite some time when, absent-mindedly looking around, noticed I had just passed the classroom I thought I came out of some time ago. I drew it so you could better picture it. Redditor 17. I was driving home from my girlfriend's one night. Going home the back way. Where I live is very flat, so the road I was on was dead straight with no bumps, small hills, or any places the road got higher or lower or anything like that. So I'm just driving straight, got my high beams on because there's no one around, and I can see everything in front of me. There's no houses on either side, no driveways, just fields. Nothing behind me either. Out of nowhere, a car appears about 20 feet in front of me, driving the opposite direction on the other side of the road. I was going pretty fast, so I passed them quickly, and when I look in my rear view, there's nothing there. Freaked me out so bad I had to pull over and gather my thoughts before I could keep going. Still freaks me out to remember it. Edit, spelling. Edit 2. A ton of people have been saying that someone was just driving with their lights off and turned them on to freak me out, but this doesn't make sense because I would have seen them much sooner with my high beams on. Someone threw out the idea of microsleep, which I may have experienced and been woken up from by the other car's headlights. There's probably some logical explanation for it, but I like to think of it as my experience with glitches in the Matrix. Redditor 18. I was eating popcorn in front of the TV and dropped a piece. When it should have hit the ground, I heard a faint pop noise. My mom was a stickler about messes, so I looked all over, under the couch, under the TV stand, everywhere, and couldn't find that popcorn. About a year later, I'm watching TV again, and I hear the same faint pop. I look down, and right between my feet is a freshly popped kernel of popcorn. I picked it up, and it was still warm. I'd been sitting there for at least an hour, and there was nobody else in the room. Quantum popcorn. Redditor 19, this happened to me in 3rd grade, and it scared me so much I started crying and had to go to the office to talk to the principal about it. I was in the hallway for misbehaving, and my neighbor Tad, a year younger than me, came walking out of a class to my right, passed in front of me and headed down some stairs. We said hi to each other. About 20 seconds later, he walked out of the same class, passed in front of me, and headed down the stairs. I just stared at him, confused and afraid, and he looked back like, "Why the F are you looking at me like that?" I never realized how much it was like Matrix deja vu. Edit, I thought of a second example of this, and as long as this thread is so popular, I may as well share it. A few years after this incident, my sister and I were hanging in the living room, watching TV. We both saw our mom walk through the other room, and through the adjacent hall. Maybe 20 minutes later, she came in from the backyard. My sister and I looked at each other confused, and asked her how she got back outside. She didn't know what we were talking about. She had been outside for hours. No one else was home, of course. Redditor 20, I can't explain this, and I hardly believe it myself. I've only ever told a couple of people, all of whom refused to believe it could happen. On 2 occasions I have breathed underwater with no mechanical assistance. I was about 11 when it first happened. I was swimming one afternoon in the diving well at my gym. The pool is about 14 feet deep, with a fairly small surface area. I've always been a strong and confident swimmer, and love to dive to the bottom of the pool and flip over, open my eyes, and look up at the surface. So, I dive down, and sitting against the wall I have the overwhelming urge to breathe in. I refuse this thought, disbelieving and scoffing at my brain's sheer strangeness. But the thought comes again, and it is utterly convincing. I can't explain why I decided to breathe in. I just know that I would never choose to do that, but in this instance I did. I took the most careful, mincing breath in. I could feel great pressure, but I breathed normally. It was air I breathed and not water. I took 4 full breaths while sitting at the bottom of the pool, and after each breath I became more horrified and agitated. My disbelief was outstanding. I kinda freaked and shot to the surface quick as I could. After I rationalized a bit, I calmed down. My logical mind kept thinking that somehow I'd had a bubble of air caught on my face, for how else could I have breathed like that? But over the years of trying to make sense of it, 30 years old now, I recognize that air always finds its way to the surface expediently. It won't just catch around someone's face. I tried to do it again that day, diving and diving, trying to replicate the experience. Got quite a bit of water up my nose before I gave up. It did happen a second time, same pool, 4 years later. I took 5 breaths, same feeling of overwhelming confidence that it would be okay to breathe. Couldn't explain it the second time either. Very strange. Glitch. I don't know. No one has ever believed me, but I've only ever mentioned it to a select few. I still can't figure it out. Does anyone have any physics logic thoughts on this? Has this happened to anyone else? Redditor 21, can we please make this into a subreddit? Redditor 22, I used to have a lot of weird run-ins with seeing strange men in suits at random times places a few years back. I always thought this was Matrix-related agents, but then I discovered Slender Man. Redditor 23, one of my friends has a family photo on her wall of her family in Florida back in 1998, and about 4 years ago we were all round at her place for a party and one of the girls burst out crying. When she finally calmed down, she said that in the background of the photo a family is walking past and it's her mom, dad and brother, and she's more or less looking into the camera. We all laugh about it now, but it's so weird to look at. Redditor 24, oh man, I have one of these that involves the Matrix. I got my wisdom teeth out in 2000, right around the time that the original Matrix came out on VHS. I was bombed completely out of my mind on Percocet after coming back from the surgery. I had awful wisdom teeth, and my mom basically just dropped me in bed and went and rented the movie for me because I'd never seen it in theaters. I remember being irritated that the sun through the window was making the TV glare but being too out of it to get up. A little bit after the black cat glitch in the Matrix scene, I passed out and apparently slept for about 8 hours. The tape in the VHS machine kept rewinding itself and playing over and over again. I woke up and the movie was at roughly the same spot as when I passed out, but it was completely dark outside. Zero time lapse for me. Completely lost my mind. Started freaking out and screaming because I thought I'd discovered the secret and somebody turned off the sun. I remember crying and trying to explain to my panicked family, who have never let me live it down. Redditor 25. When my drama class went to Disneyland, they took a big group picture in front of the castle. They took 3 pictures to make sure they got one good one. The first and last photo are normal, but the second has a guy no one's seen before in between 2 people with his arms around their shoulders. No one noticed him when the picture was taken. Redditor 26. 2 years ago edit. 3 years I had a dream that a meteor ripped through most of my house and my neighbor's house. It reminded me of something out of a war movie when a bomb goes off and my roommate and I are disoriented and semi-deaf as we walk around the fire and rubble screaming and looking for roommates and neighbors. It felt very real and painful and was horrific. I woke up really shaken and told my roommate about it in the morning. About 3 hours later my whole house starts rumbling and we hear the sound of like a turbine engine powering down directly over my house followed by 2 huge explosions. We run outside and there is billowing black smoke. We run around the block to the houses on the other side and see 2 houses completely ripped through by a fighter jet. The houses were completely destroyed and what was still standing was on fire. We tried walking around and yelling to see if anyone was in the houses. It was then when my roommate reminded me of my dream. I like to say coincidence because I don't believe that, but I still can't explain it. Some photos 201, 162, 465, 59667.html. Tag equals page. Next. Edit. TL. Doctor dreamt meteor ripped through mine and neighbor's house. Same day fighter jet rips through houses behind me. Redditor 27. Alright, pretty sure this'll get buried but I've always wanted to share this story. So my family and I moved when I was in 3rd grade. Before we moved my parents brought me and my siblings on a road trip to introduce us to our future house. It was owned by this nice old man who did a lot of self-repair over the years. We still find little oddities every now and then undoubtedly left by him. I walked inside, waved at a kind-looking old lady in a rocking chair, walked around, and then we left. Nothing odd. Except for one small detail. As we left the house, I was a little confused. But Mom, I asked, I thought you said owner of house lived by himself. Who was the old lady? My mom gave me a 3-headed look. What old lady? My family agreed with her. There wasn't an old lady sitting in the living room, and the owner's wife had died recently. Yeah. I have a couple other weird stories about that house if anyone's interested. Edit. Wow. Woke up in the morning to a huge response. I posted another story and a reply to this one. It's weird. Redditor 28. I've related this story before but here goes. The parallel universe answering machine. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, "Hey, it's me kill all extremists. Sorry I missed you, call you later. Bye." And then I hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day he called back and he says, "Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl." Well, as it turns out the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave as quoted above, there was a slight pause and it continues on for another 30-40 seconds or so with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I didn't recognize. You could compare it to the message I know I did leave and the 2 voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice but, talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation I was talking to this girl about going skiing but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that recorded the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and had analyzed, unfortunately. Also, neither I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky, I can't explain it. TLDR, I may have connected to an alternate universe through a telephone answering machine. Redditor 29, at 16 yo, sitting in a circle of friends at a party, stoned, someone I had bad relations with threw a lighter at my head without warning from the side, couldn't see it, long hair, caught it like a ninja, turned slowly and stared at the thrower, who went pale, never fucked with me again. No idea how I did that. Sitting in a bar with some friends, laughing, joking, pop. Something in my head went pop and I felt like my brain had been reset for a split second. Talked to others about it, they had no idea what I was talking about. Then I said, "Gary's here." I thought he was here for some reason. About 20 seconds later, Gary walks into the bar. Still not sure what happened. Tell him about it all later. He says he came because I called him. I checked my phone, did not call, he has no record of it either. It's like someone reversed time and fucked up some of the details of the memory wipe. Those are the two most memorable I can think of. Oh, there was also the time I got really stoned and this block of chocolate on my computer desk disappeared. It just kind of gradually vanished over a couple of hours. Redditor 30, I'm sure this has been posted before, but there are two things that have happened to me that were sort of reality glitches. The first time was when I was laying in my bed in my dorm room and looking out the window at the falling snow at night. My roommate was across the room in his bed doing the same thing, and we were both talking about how nice it looked when bam, I blink and suddenly it's daytime. I look around confused and don't see my roommate anywhere in sight. Freaking out and thinking that everyone in the world has disappeared, I go looking for him and eventually find him, and I ask him what happened. He had absolutely no idea what I was talking about, and I asked him, "Where did the night go?" and he says, "We were both looking out the window looking at the snow when you just got really quiet and didn't say anything when I asked you questions, so I assumed you were asleep. But when I looked over, you were just staring there with your eyes open looking out the window and actually blinked a few times. I just thought you were sleeping with your eyes open." TLDR, my night sort of disappeared in the blink of an eye. The second weird thing was that once I woke up and checked my iPod and saw that it was 5 o'clock. Seeing as how I didn't have to go to work until 7 o'clock, I decided to try to go back to sleep. I very specifically remembered checking my clock to make sure it was 5 o'clock because I did not want to oversleep. Anyways, I fall back asleep, and when I wake up, I check my iPod to see if I have to go to work yet. I had a pregnant when I saw that my iPod clock read 4:30. I checked my actual clock and that also read 4:30. TLDR, I am the lamest time traveler in the world. Edit, for all those asking what I had a pregnant means, see this. Redditor 31, one time I spilled a bowl of SpaghettiOs, and as I was cleaning them, I noticed that one was on the ceiling. 9 feet up. I didn't even drop the bowl. I just tipped it over onto the counter by mistake. But sure enough, a single O was right there, stuck to the ceiling. Redditor 32, I was driving home from college one day and I pulled up at a red light at an intersection. The car in front of me was one of those aqua teal Honda Civics that were popular in the mid to late 90s. I look to my right. The gas station marquee says something like, "Always be aware of your surroundings when you shift." That's not verbatim, but I remember shift being capitalized for some reason. I thought it was kind of peculiar, and that's when I noticed that the car immediately to my right was, in fact, another of the same colored Honda Civics. Okay, interesting coincidence. Then I figure, what the heck, how funny would it be if? And look in my rear view mirror. Yep. Aqua teal Civic behind me. So I look to my left. Sure enough, same car. I'm surrounded by them on all sides. I chuckle to myself, thinking it's nothing. The light turns green and we begin to move. 3 of the Civics move into the right lane. As they're traveling next to me, I notice that they have no license plates. There are drivers, and the interiors are all tan or ecru. They all merge onto a northbound route and I continue on my way. For the past 15 years I've maintained that I somehow shifted Hey the Marquis's words, not mine, into a dimension other than the one in which I was born. I bring this up when things seem really off in the world. Example, Rick Santorum? A viable presidential candidate? Sigh, I really need to find a way back to my home dimension. Edit. Just a quick note to everybody suggesting that the cars were headed to the dealership and such. Yes, I'm well aware of the fact that this is the most likely reason for the situation, but we're all trying to have some fun here. The only real reason that it was kind of weird is that the marquee at the gas station said something oddly relevant. Right time, right place for a strange coincidence, but the story is a lot of fun at parties. At the time I lived to the north of Washington, D.C., and the northbound route that the cars all exited onto would take them toward a small area called Briggs Cheney. This was the location of one of the larger Honda dealerships in the area. Redditor33 posted this before in a similar thread that didn't gain traction. Of course, I'll preface this with the usual, I'm not a superstitious or generally spiritual person, but in high school I was in the drum line, and we usually practiced early in the morning prior to school starting. We were inside the band room that day because it was fairly cold. So anyway, I'm doing my thing, playing the tenor's toms for the layman, and I drop one of my mallets. I turn to pick it up and I can't find it. There is about 10 feet of open bare floor surrounding me and nowhere to be found. My instructor stops us and basically just asks me what the problem is. So several of us start searching around, can't find it. I say screw it and grab a spare set. About 20 minutes later, the band director walks in, unlocks his office, sits at his desk and knocks on the window. I look up and he picks up the mallet off his desk with a look like, "What is this doing in here?" I could verify that it was mine because I marked each set. Nobody had gone in or out, no gap under the door, locked room, ended up on the desk. There were 15 of us in the room at that time and there was a unanimous nope moment. I was stunned and one of my buddies came unglued. We pretty much canceled the rest of rehearsal right there, and many of us were pretty bugged about it the rest of the day. I couldn't concentrate on anything for almost a week after that. Eventually my brain just filed it away under unsolved mysteries and I went on with life. TL.DR playing drums, dropped stick, edit, it ended up in a locked room. Redditor34, right after high school, I got a job lifeguarding at a water park resort. I had been there about a year and by that point, dreaming about work was pretty routine. The dreams weren't usually about anything dramatic like rescuing a distressed swimmer or doing CPR, but on this particular occasion I had a dream that one of my co-workers rescued an unconscious boy from a particular pool. In the dream I was only assisting with the first aid, not the primary in the rescue, but I remember clearly what the boy looked like. I went back to work the next day after the dream after having a few days off, and about halfway through my shift I see the kid from the dream walking through the park with his family. They were still in their street clothes and had just checked in, so there was no way I could have seen him before. I nearly fell out of my chair. He didn't drown, but holy duck was I careful to keep an eye on him the whole time he was visiting. Redditor35, my little sister, call her Susie, and I were exploring the cottage a few years ago and came across a pair of walkie-talkies. Now this in itself wasn't unusual. It's an isolated, sprawling place shared by many friends and family who often leave things behind as they come and go. We run around in the night trying them out, and find out there's about a 10-20 meters cutoff range. We're fooling around and eventually we're on opposite sides of the house when something like the following exchange goes down. Me, breaker come in, this is Thundercat. Over Susie, giggling, this is Dragon 7, we are closing in on your location. Over me, negative, you'll never catch me. Thundercat out. Susie, giggling, who is this? Me, this is Thundercat, come in. Poop Smith. Susie, giggling, no, who is this? At this point I walk into the next room and see Susie looking through a bookshelf, walkie-talkie abandoned on the floor. She says hello to me and the giggling is still coming from the walkie-talkie. I look at her, I look at the walkie-talkie, and ask, wait, who is this? The giggling stops on the other end of the line. There's nothing but dead air. The next house is a couple of km away and there's nothing but woods and a spooky cave around us. Susie says she got bored of the walkie-talkie a while ago, and denies any part in the goofy codename conversation. We search the place top to bottom and find no one and nothing that could have been making the call. We try the walkie-talkie a few more times but are never able to raise our ghost girl again. I still accuse her of having been the voice on the other end of the line once in a while, but deep down I know that when I told her what went down, she showed real fear. TLDR haunted walkie-talkie. Redditor 36. My friend used to put up a recurring away message, back in the day when everybody had AIM. She was a Beatles superfan and put up a sentiment from John and Yoko, Acorns for Peace. Well, one day I was walking around my college campus thinking about it, but failing to remember the full quote. In my mind, I kept thinking, something for peace. Something for peace. What the heck is that away message? Right then, some chick on a cell phone walks by me and screams out acorns. I realize this is not a super freaky story, but it made my day at the time. It's not every day someone screams out acorns in your vicinity at the exact right time. Redditor 37. I remember being in Japanese class with my friends. We had just gotten out of calculus, and were discussing random mathy stuff under the din of the rest of the kids waiting for the teacher. Eventually, I asked my friend, wait, what would 00 be? At that moment, the entire class goes silent for about a second, then resumes like nothing happened. Nobody was listening to us or paid attention. We always joked afterwards that I crashed the universe, and it had to reboot. Redditor 38. About a year ago, an online friend's cat ran away. He was inconsolable, since he grew up with the cat and it was basically one of his best friends. I vaguely recalled him telling me a long time ago that the cat had run away for 3 days once, and had gotten stuck in a local barbecue restaurant while it was closed for the weekend. I didn't mention it, because I figured it would make my friend more upset. 3 days later, the cat comes back, smelling like barbecue sauce because it got stuck in the restaurant over the weekend. My friend swears the cat had never run away before, and I could find no record of the supposed cat ran away conversation in any of our chat logs. He never even mentioned there was a barbecue restaurant near his house. Redditor 39. This'll probably get buried. When I was around 20, a few years ago, I kept having dreams about a woman with long black hair named Aurora, pronounced Aurora. They were different dreams, but for some reason, her distinct face and name always ended up in them. It got to the point where I would wake up frustrated and confused, trying to Google her name or find out how I was connected to her. After a few months she stopped showing up and I dismissed it, thinking my brain was just being a scumbag. Fast forward a few years later, Halloween 2009, I'm in the car with a friend stopped at a gas station. I'm about to pull out and merge onto a highway when I get a phone call from a random number, so I stop the car but no one answered. There was a person behind me who grew impatient, honked at me, and then swerved in front of me instead of waiting for 2 seconds for me to move. Second they get on the highway, some silver Civic loses control of their wheel and crashes into the car that swerved in front of me. I called the cops and waited at the gas station for them to come. Turns out the drivers of both cars died. It 100% would have been me if I hadn't have got that phone call. Called it back a few hours later out of gratitude and curiosity, rang 3 times and went to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Aurora, please leave your name and number. Never had goosebumps like that in me life. Called it again the next day, because I was that confused about the whole situation. Some woman answers, we get to talking, I tell her my entire story including the dreams I had. She tells me she doesn't know how I got her number and that she never called me as far as she remembers. Weird. Ask her if she has a Facebook to confirm if she is in fact the woman in my dreams. Check her Facebook, holy fuck, it's her. If that's not a glitch in the Matrix then I'm just batshit crazy. Redditor 40, my sister and I were walking down an aisle in Walmart looking for back to school supplies. We're looking at notebooks or whatever, and she moves closer to the aisle. This bracelet just falls to the ground. I saw it just appear there. I'm sure it was a trick of my mind or something, but it was almost like someone had just dropped it there. It fell, it wasn't thrown. I don't know, it freaked me out. Especially because when I pointed it out to my sister, she recognized it as one she'd lost months ago. Redditor 41, I was in class one day, sitting in a group of 3 people including myself. We were talking and my friend dropped his pen on the desk. I saw it stall in mid-air for a second then drop on his desk. My friend asked, did anyone else see that? All my friends saw it, and it was just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. To this day I have no explanation for it. Redditor 42. When I was a child I had a lot of dreams about a cemetery with a huge cross in the middle of it. The dreams always freaked me out. In the dreams there was always something not right about the place. Not evil but something unsettling. Anyway, fast forward a few years. I would be about 10 maybe. Anyway, I was out with my mom, dad and sister. We were visiting a German cemetery for soldiers that had been captured and brought to the UK. Soon as I started getting close to the cemetery I started to feel very uneasy and that something was wrong. I remember walking through a small building what led into the cemetery. At this point I knew that the cross was going to be there like it was in my dreams. I remember seeing it, but that's where my memory stops. Nothing bad happened, well not that I remember lol. I had never been there before in my life and had never heard about it before then. Sorry for spelling and stuff. Typing on my phone. Redditor 43. I joke with my husband that I regularly wake up in slightly different universes. Everything's the same except for tiny details. For one, I distinctly remember my youthful experiences with original flavor SpaghettiOs and they were always tomato sauce. About a month ago, I took a look at them again and they're tomato and cheese sauce. I've looked at Wikipedia, consumer timelines, in this universe, that shit is tomato and cheese. I swear to you I grew up in a reality where it was only tomato sauce. This refers specifically to what original flavor is. I'm aware there's a tomato sauce variant as well. In this reality. Or something. Redditor 44. I have always had a fear that people can read my mind. I remember I was on my way to my birthday party, and I had just bought a new dress. I wasn't sure about how I looked in it. As I was going up the escalator, this other woman was walking down the stairs adjacent to the escalator. I remember thinking, I really hope I don't look stupid right now, and this woman says, well, I think you look great. In this reassuring way. Maybe I just looked insecure, maybe someone else on the stairs in front of her was talking about how I looked stupid, but to this day the experience has amplified my paranoia of mind reading. Redditor 45. I have a strange and inexplicably vivid memory from my childhood. One day I was playing Sonic the Hedgehog at my uncle's house and eating Cheetos. I got particularly engrossed in the game and started to reach over for the Cheetos without looking. I patted around on the floor with my hand before taking my eyes off the screen. When I finally turned to look for the Cheetos, they were floating a foot off the floor. The instant I realized that they were in the air, they dropped to the ground. I ran out of the room screaming. Redditor 46. I'm walking into work and going through one of the aisles. The aisles have shelves and stands that are completely bolted to the ground, so there's no empty space under them. They're completely sealed off. As I'm walking towards my department, a random super ball rolls out from under the stands. My mind was blown. I then picked up, bounced it, and it hit my friend in the face. Redditor 47. My friend has this recurring dream where he is in his room trying to sleep. He looks at the clock and it is some random time. Then a shadowy figure enters the room and walks toward him and envelops him in a bitter cold. He wakes up and the clock is exactly 5 minutes before the time in his dream, like it's about to happen. TLD, our friend probably got RP'd by his uncle as a kid. Redditor 48. I got up in the morning. Saw the sun in a weird position. Checked compass, it said west. The sun rose from the fucking west that day. I told everyone I knew but they all said east. I checked 3 damn compasses that day, damn it. Redditor 49. My husband and I met in our late 20s. We grew up near each other but went to different high schools and colleges, were a few years apart, and hung with completely different crowds. My parents put in a bid on the house next door to his parents when I was about 11. It fell through and we moved elsewhere. While in college, he traveled to my school to compete in a game. Since it was homecoming, he ended up briefly watching the parade. Out of hundreds of people, he remembers me and telling his friend I was a cool chick. Not only had I been drinking, but I was dressed as a crab and standing next to Ariel from The Little Mermaid. I nearly shat myself when he told me about watching me dance badly around in the street and take pictures with the little kids. While attending a house party with my now husband, I was looking at pics on the walls taken at parties his friends had thrown back in high school. I was on one side of a pic and he was on the other side of the big group. I went to about 20 parties back in the day, and I do not remember ever partying anywhere near his area. My husband and I were best friends with a guy and girl who are cousins. We both went to endless family gatherings, but never met. We heard stories about each other, and had never even seen a picture of one another. After 6 years, we finally met and were an item by the end of the night, and we've been together ever since. Redditor 50, I grew up in North Texas, and one of my friends has a cow farm and a lot of land. The name of the street he lived on was his family name. Me and my friends would go out there a lot on weekends, way out on the land far from his house, bring a guitar and some weed, and make a campfire and just hang out. One summer night my friend asked if we wanted to see a haunted house. He said it wasn't really haunted per se, but it was way out in the middle of nowhere, and was abandoned. He said he'd driven by it a few times on farm routes but he never had the stones to go explore it himself, especially not at night. It was one of those times where no one wanted to be the first to say no, so we all said yes. It was a cool, clear night, and we piled into my friend's sedan car. We were listening to some good old classic rock tunes and generally enjoying ourselves. We came to an area where we had to drive over a very old river, which was now a stream. This stream had eroded this patch of land for so long, that it had become a very, very steep depression. There was a large plank of wood across the remainder of the stream, making it a flat enough plane to drive across. Our friend assured us it was safe for the car, even though it looked like the angle was too steep for a car to cross without being damaged. By this point, the atmosphere had changed. We were no longer just hanging out all fancy-free. Few of us were speaking because we were just looking at the windows at the dark, looming trees and expanses of moonlit grass. We held our breath as we crossed the stream, and when we crossed it, there was a sea change in the way I felt. It was as if I could sense the house getting closer. No one had said a word for the past 10 minutes, other than my friend giving us time estimates of how much further we were from the house. There was nothing out here. Not even a paved road. There was a dirt road formed from cars, but it was very old and overgrown, as if it had not been used, except perhaps sparingly, for a decade. Suddenly, I became aware of something that had been present for a good portion of the trip but had occurred so slowly that I hardly noticed. I broke the silence. Everything is black and white. I can only see black and white. Everyone else in the car started to freak out because they could only see black and white, too. There was no color anywhere, just shades of black, like an old photo. Are we dead? I asked. I was convinced we had died along the way, but had not been aware we were dead, like a horror movie. I still have no explanation for this. We pulled up to the house. Color had returned, it seemed, but it was so dark that it didn't matter anyway. The house was 2 stories, at a slight tilt, and the face of the house looked menacingly down at us. It was an old, southern house, with white pillars that had become discolored with age, and faux balconies jutting out from under the second-story windows. About 50 meters from the house was a large, metallic silo. As the headlights from our car washed over the area, the darkness took its time to leave, because it had become so settled there. We began walking slowly towards the house. In the front yard, there were lots of holes in the ground, freshly dug, about the size to fit a small, potted houseplant. Inside the holes we found crumpled up pieces of paper. On the paper were crude drawings, like children's drawings. They were of people. Stick figures. Some of the stick figures would be upside down, or laying down. Some of the stick figures had faces, and they were all sad, or yelling about something. We went to the silo. It was unlocked. We went inside with a flashlight and lit up the interior portion by portion with the beam from the flashlight. It was totally empty and gleamed like polished chrome. It smelt like sawdust and old oats. I swore I heard the sound of a girl crying, but that might have been the sound of the hinges on the door. Finally, we went to the house. The doors were all broken off the hinges. There was a screen door, and it was partly torn. We went inside. We broke up into groups and tried to explore the whole thing. We were all trying to seem brave, saying things like the thing I'm most afraid of is the floor falling in. There were closets, and we'd hold our breath before we'd open the doors, but found nothing inside. The whole house was completely dark and empty. We only had one flashlight, so there might have been parts that we had missed, but we wanted to get the heck out of there. We got back to the car. One of my friends dared someone to go into the house by himself, and sit on the living room and close his eyes for 30 seconds. He said he would do it. I couldn't believe it. I could never do that. He walked off proudly towards the house. We saw him go inside. The living room was the first room on the first floor past the foyer beyond the door. Several minutes passed. We thought he was ducking with us, wanting one of us to go in after him so he could give them a scare. That's when we noticed the smell. Something smelled awful in the car. My friend who was driving looked down and saw a dead cat crammed down underneath the pedals. Then we noticed there was cat fur strewn about the car. We freaked out and started honking the horn and flashing the headlights at the house. Our friend didn't come out. Finally, me and my other friend went in after him. When he got to the living room, we found him sitting on the floor, huddled over, his back to a wall with his arms wrapped around his knees and his head buried in his legs. He looked up at us as if we should run away, as if it was too late. We told him to get off his ass so we could get the duck out of there. He pointed at the wall behind us. The lights from the car were still flashing, trying to get us to leave. Each time the lights flashed we could see it. All of our names were written on the wall in red. Later that summer, a friend of mine went back to the house during the day and burned it down. Redditor 51, I once walked out of an Applebee's and looked up to see the sky divided in half, one half a lighter shade than the other with a distinct line separating the two. It was witnesses by several other people. I was with no drugs and I've never understood it. Redditor 52, the only glitch I can think of is why I'm not already president. Redditor 53, when I was about 7, something freaky kept happening. I would go to bed, and my parents would tuck me and I loved that. I would slowly drift to sleep, only to awaken at 3:02 a.m. falling from the ceiling onto my bed. My bed sheets tucked perfectly underneath my body, where I had just been. Perfectly made bed. This happened to me at least 5 or so times. I to this day have no clue what the heck happened to me. Redditor 54, just going for a walk once, I saw a car turn down a road that was a dead end. Literally 5 seconds or less later, I looked down the road and the car is gone. Wasn't in a driveway or a garage, just gone. In before and Nigon from South Park. Redditor 55, I have an overwhelming, terrified reaction to any time I see footage or a recreation of the D-Day invasion of Normandy. I can watch anything about any other type of war battle what have you, but for some reason, and I don't know why, the D-Day invasion strikes something in me. The worst time was when I watched Saving Private Ryan. My heart felt like it was going to pound out of my chest. I felt a sense of panic that I have never felt, and tears started streaming down my face. I was paralyzed in my seat. I had the strangest you've been there feeling that I've never had before. Redditor 56, my family owns a house on Cape Cod. The previous owner was a white supremacist with an autistic son named Jimmy. Jimmy was known for putting on a trench coat and fedora, climbing trees, and shooting cats and dogs with a BB gun. When my parents moved into the house, they found a bunch of Nazi paraphernalia in a bedroom. They put it in the shed, told the former owner they had a week to get rid of it, and then threw it out. Of course, at the age of 7, I didn't know any of this. That's when I was visited 5 nights in a row by a figure in a trench coat and fedora. He didn't have any detail, he looked like a silhouette, like he was being powerfully backlit but with no light source. He would stand in the corner of the room, or sit there crouched, or sit on the bed opposite mine, my brother's bed, but he was at summer camp at the time. One time, he sat in a rocking chair, and when I looked later, he was gone but the chair was still rocking. After a few nights of this, I told my parents about it. My mom called it a nightmare, but my dad was intrigued. He told me to tell the figure, Jimmy, I don't have your stuff. So the next night, when the figure appeared again in the corner of the room, I said, Jimmy, I don't have your stuff. And Jimmy walked right over to me, put his face an inch away from mine, and then disappeared. I never saw him again. Years later, I found out about the history of the house. I've often wondered if I had heard it before, and somehow suppressed it and then imagined my encounters with Jimmy. But he was and remains entirely vivid to me. Redditor 57. I was walking through Best Buy one day a couple years ago and I walked past a rack of books. Sitting on the rack was the last book in the Dark Tower series from Stephen King. The front cover had the picture of Roland in front of the tower with the field of roses behind him. I held the damn book in my hand and looked it over. I remembered being puzzled about why it was in a Best Buy, but whatever. I'd read the first 6 and had been waiting for the last one, but my spending money was low that week. I set it down and decided to come back next week after I got paid to buy it. I went back next week and it wasn't there. It slipped my mind after that for a bit, but about a month later I went to BN to get my copy. They told me it hadn't come out yet. The release date for the book was 6 months later. I pre-ordered it then. When the book actually came out I went to pick it up. I described the cover out loud to make sure I wasn't crazy. The clerk handed it to me and there it was exactly as I'd held it in Best Buy. Redditor 58. Mine was actually just like in the movie. I was walking with my friend and we saw a black cat. After saying, "Oh, kitty kitty," and walking on past where it was lying, not 5 feet later there was the exact same cat, same position and everything, with the original cat still in its place. TL, Dr. Woe. Redditor 59. My father died in 2008. A night before visiting his house for the last time, he appeared in my dream, where he handed to me a black camera in a plastic bag, and specifically said, "Take this camera, as I won't be needing it anymore," and I took it from him. First thing in the morning, I visit his house, where most of the stuff is already moved by my uncle, and open one of his wardrobes, find a sealed cardboard box deep inside, rip it open with a knife and take out his retro black camera. Apparently my uncle missed that one, and took off all his other electronics but the camera. All I can say is that, this experience was a proper communication and it significantly eased my pain, knowing that something remains after a loved one passes. Redditor 60. One time during a night of heavy drinking, I was sitting at the counter with my drink in a red plastic cup. I noticed a much fancier glass on the counter, and decided that I would prefer to drink out of that instead. So I transferred my drink from the red cup into the fancier glass and continued conversing with my friends. Then there's this period of a minute or so where I don't remember anything, but according to my friends I was just sitting there the whole time. When I came back around, I was holding a full glass and a full plastic cup. It was like piracy, but with alcohol.